Ray Bradbury was born August 22, 1920 in Waukegan, Illinois. His mother was a Swedish immigrant and his father was a power and telephone lineman. Ray was the youngest of him and his two brothers. While growing up, Ray was in love with many science fiction heroes such as Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. These are some of the characters that influenced Bradbury to begin to publish science fiction stories in 1938. Bradbury began writing after being rejected by the military because of his bad eyesight during World War II. He is now a famous author, essayist, playwright, scene writer, lecturer, poet, and visionary.
The key events for Fahrenheit 451 are when Montag murdered Beatty, when he killed him with a flamethrower, and when Clarice died, they say she got run over by a car. When the old lady set herself and her house on fire, they came to her house to burn her books, and then she didn't want to leave her books, so she had a match, and she threatened to light the house on fire where they were in it, so they all left, and she lit the house on fire with herself in it. When Montag read poetry to Mildred and her friends, he scared them by reading poetry to them. When the mechanical hound chased Montag around the city, once they heard about Montag killing Beatty, the world sent another mechanical hound after Montag, and it chased him around the city, and then he jumped in the river, and the mechanical hound lost his scent. And then when the atomic bomb dropped on the city, that was like the city went at war, and no one really knew what was going to happen or got warned. And then the atomic bomb got dropped on the city, and then everybody died.
The plot for Fahrenheit 451. The first stage of plot is exposition. The exposition is when Montag was living in a futuristic world where books are forbidden. All books were prohibited, and if anyone was caught with them, they would be burned alive. The next stage, which is rising action, is when Montag meets Clarice in the park late one night, and she gets him thinking about life and his job as a fireman. The climax is when Montag steals the book from the old lady's home that he was supposed to be burning. The falling action is when Montag starts communicating with Faber because he needs to know more about books and he wants more knowledge. Then the mechanical hound goes on a search for Montag. The conclusion is when the mechanical hound loses Montag, so he has to kill an innocent man for publicity, and then the atomic bomb is dropped on the city and everyone dies.
There are 5 main characters in Fahrenheit 451. There is Guy Montag. He is a fireman who eventually realizes the emptiness in his life and starts to try to find the meaning in the books he is supposed to be burning. Even though he is temporarily having a hard time to think for himself, he is determined to break free from the abuse of ignorance. He quickly and easily attaches to people who appreciate true friendships. His biggest regret is not having a true relationship with his wife, Mildred. Another main character is Mildred. Mildred Montag is Guy Montag's wife. She is described as almost sickly looking with pale skin, untouched by the sun, and bleached, chemical-treated hair. She is obsessed with electronics like her television and refuses to engage in regular conversation with Guy about the marriage or her feelings. Her suicide attempt, which she refuses to admit or even acknowledge, clearly shows how she harbors a great deal of pain. Small-minded and childish, she doesn't understand her husband and apparently has no desire to even try. Beatty is another one of the main characters. Captain Beatty is the captain of Montag's fire department. Even though he is extremely well-read, he hates those who insist on reading books because he personally hates books. He is devious and clever and almost appears to know the future and Montag's thoughts about what he has done and what he is going to do. Faber is another main character. Professor Faber is a retired English professor that Montag met a year before the book begins. Faber still owns a few books and wants to have more. He says that the reason the society is like it is because people like him will not speak up and say that the burning of books is wrong. He classifies himself as a coward, but he does different tasks that require courage and place him in real danger. Clarice McClellan is a 17-year-old girl who introduces Montag to the real world. She is an outcast from society because of her odd habits like walking in the park and asking questions. But she and her family seem to be genuinely happy with themselves and each other.
The setting for Fahrenheit 451 is a very important part of this book because of many things. One reason is because if the book was not set in a futuristic setting, much of the book would not have been as descriptive as it was. Ray Bradbury was able to be creative and descriptive because of the time period he was in. The futuristic setting of this book also allows Bradbury to imagine key parts of the book, such as the mechanical hound. It also helps him show the dangers of depending on technology too much. The author's purpose for this setting is so that it allows him to predict the future without books and try to keep us from depending on technology too much. Conflict for Fahrenheit 451. The two major conflicts in Fahrenheit 451 to me is first, Montag versus society. This is shown because Guy Montag is conflicted about the society he lives in. After meeting a girl named Clarice, who is fun and different from everyone else he's met, Montag begins to feel there is something missing from his life. He soon learns that what is missing is what his society fears most, thinking and feeling. This conflict is external because it is between Montag and the rest of society. The way this conflict is resolved is that after the nuclear bomb is dropped, a new world has to be formed. At that point, the rebels of society came out and helped to rebuild a new society with books this time. The second conflict of Fahrenheit 451 is between Montag and himself. He struggles on trying to decide whether he should just continue his life as is or if he should quit his job and become a rebel of the government. It is internal because he struggles within his mind over this issue. He ends up coming to peace within himself and chooses to be a reader/thinker.
The 4 quotes for Fahrenheit 451. First quote, "And on either side of the river was there a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations." This quote comes from the Bible, the book of Exodus to be exact. Montag tries to memorize this quote and many others when he realizes that he will have to give the book back. He then repeats the quote at a crucial time when he is walking into the city after the atomic bomb had been dropped. The second quote, "So it was the hand that started it all. His hands had been infected, and soon it would be his arms. His hands were ravenous." This quote refers to Montag's theft of the book from the old woman's house. He describes his crime as automatic, involving no thought on his part. He describes stealing the book as a poison because of his guilty conscience and knowledge of wrongdoing. The third quote, "We must all be alike, not everyone born free and equal as the Constitution states, but everyone made equal." Captain Beatty says this to Montag in his home. This was the most important quote in his speech to Montag because it had an ironic sounding. Beatty told him this in order to make him understand he shouldn't be curious about books, that he needed to have the same amount of knowledge as everyone else. The fourth quote, "A book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind." This quote is saying, books are bad. There is no good in a book. All books should be done away with. Beatty says this to Montag while explaining to him the history of firemen. He is trying to prove to Montag that firemen do good, not harm. He talks about the use of books as weapons, but uses books for himself freely.
In the book Fahrenheit 451, everyone in society does whatever they want to and enjoy themselves and have fun. One way they do this is with the advanced technology they obtain. An example of these people addicted to technology is Guy Montag's own wife, Mildred. Like today's world, she loves her music. Just like Mildred is in the book, many people and kids now are addicted with their MP3s, iPods, and radios. Also, almost everyone in this community has TVs. They are addicted to TV. They are judged by how many TVs they have and how big they are. This is very similar to today because many people are judged by how big their TVs are and how many they have. Lastly, many families in the book have robotic homes to make their lives easier. More and more houses today are even becoming like this to make their jobs easier.